doing as a result of it. Then what I'd like to do is bring us down to HESI. So if this is what's happening, and this is what Humble ISD is doing, then what can HESI do to advance our work? What can we do to further our partnership? So with that, if I might, just pass these out. How about if I just give you these? Yeah. Pass them around. Thank you. And I'm not necessarily going to thank you. And so what we'll do is we'll just go through each one of these. Did you get them? And I just wanted to highlight some of these slides and elaborate on some of the information on these slides. But from a national perspective, remember what I would like to do is talk nationally, then get down to the state, and then get down into Humble ISD. But nationally, what I wanted to bring forward was some information about two most recent studies on academic achievement. Very specifically, the McKinsey Achievement Study, which is very new and very, very compelling. As a matter of fact, there were aspects of this McKinsey study cited in the Houston Chronicle about 6 weeks ago. And then what I also wanted to do was cite some information from the Civic Enterprises and the Hart Research Associates that did a study for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And I don't know if you all are familiar with Bill and Melinda Gates, but they have poured millions of dollars into the public education school system for its transformation. So that said, if we can go ahead and talk a little bit about the McKinsey Achievement Study. And very specifically, what they looked at was the Program for International Assessment. It's called PISA. And what they were measuring was applied learning and problem solving of 15-year-olds in 30 industrialized countries. And within this study, what they found was that the United States ranked 25 out of 30 in math and 24 out of 30 in science. This ranking puts us on par with Portugal and the Slavic Republic. So, who were the top ranked countries? Who were the ones that were 1 through 6 out of 30? Well, in math, the top 6 were Finland, Korea, the Netherlands, Switzerland, Canada, and Japan in math. In science, the top countries were Korea, Finland, so those were the top 2, Canada, New Zealand, the Netherlands, and Australia. So we were not competitive with those, but rather we were in the lower quartile. So these were some of the trends that this McKinsey Achievement Study discovered. Overall, fourth graders in the United States compare well in this sample group. They were competitive. They compared well. They did well with these other fourth graders. However, what the study found was that the longer American children are in school, the worse they compare to their international peers. Basically, we start to have a secondary high school lag. What they also discovered was this persistence of a United States achievement gap is the economic equivalent of a permanent national recession. The more we have an achievement gap, the greater the achievement gap becomes, the more it feels like we're in this economic recession. They also found that low academic consequences result in lower earnings, poorer health, and higher rates of incarceration. They did cite some very significant economic consequences. So, this was one of their findings. If the United States closed its educational achievement levels between the United States and those nations that were in the top rank, such as Finland and Korea, then our gross domestic product in 2008 could have been 1.3 trillion to 2.3 trillion higher. If the United States closed the gap between African American and Latino student performance and white student performance, that would have resulted in 310 billion and 525 billion higher gross domestic product in 2008. And if the United States close the achievement gap between the United States lowest performing states and then the remaining states, that would, in 2008, have been 425 billion to 700 billion. So economic consequences are huge when we've got such high achievement gaps. Similar findings, if we go into the research cited for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, we had similar findings in this particular study. This particular study, however, was called the silent epidemic. This was perspectives of the high school dropout. One of their findings was every year almost 1/3 of all public high school students and nearly 1/2 of blacks and Hispanics and Native Americans failed to graduate high school within their class. They're called cohorts, 4-year cohorts. They also found that dropouts are more likely than their peers who graduate to be unemployed, living in poverty, receiving public assistance, in prison, on death row, unhealthy, divorced, and single parents with children who will eventually repeat the pattern, who will also become dropouts. So the focus of their study was, why do students drop out? And this is what they found. There were a multitude of reasons, but they categorized them in 4 areas. First of all, students reported that there was a lack of connection to the school environment. They were bored, they were disengaged. 47% said that the classes weren't interesting, couldn't hold their interest. They didn't know why they were learning the things that they were learning. And 42% of these students cited that teachers were not interested in the students. And if you remember when I talked about my own family, this idea of an adult advocate, teachers getting involved in students and helping them obtain scholarships, helping them fill out applications, helping them scaffold their learning so that they could advance. Students who dropped out in schools, they didn't feel that teachers were interested in them. Another area was that they felt unmotivated. 69% of them said that they were not motivated or inspired to do the work. 80% of them said that they did not continue any kind of learning outside the school. They didn't read, they didn't write, they didn't do homework. They were not interested in doing anything outside of the school walls. And 67% said they felt unmotivated because they needed something more rigorous. They needed higher academic standards rather than just ordinary, mundane calculations, low kinds of studies and understandings. Additionally, the students cited that there were some academic challenges. And this is pretty interesting. It said that 35% of the high school students who dropped out identified that they just couldn't keep up with the work. Some of them, 43% of them, said that they began missing too many days, and once that cycle happened, they couldn't recover. 45% of them said that they began falling behind in elementary and middle schools, and again, the cycle became so pervasive they couldn't catch up. And then finally, another sample stated that tutoring and after-school help was not available, or even if it was available, it was not accessible to them because they had no transportation home. They had to ride the bus, and if they missed the bus, they couldn't get home. They didn't have people to be able to come and pick them up. And finally, in terms of academic challenges, they said that repeating a grade or a class created a doubt of their abilities and, quite honestly, a loss of confidence. They didn't really think they could do it. The final category of why